Welcome to the Political Checkmate, and today I'm going to checkmate the first Robert Reich video I have ever saw before, called The 5 Biggest Myths Republicans Use to Avoid Raising the Minimum Wage, from Nowthis News. So here we go.
Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress continue to block increases in the minimum wage, which is currently set at just $7.25 an hour. Now, here are the 5 biggest conservative myths about the minimum wage, followed by the truth. Number 1, they say the current minimum wage is already high enough. Well, that's rubbish.
Taxes too high, wages too high.
If the minimum wage in 1968 had simply kept up with inflation, it would be more than $10 today. If it also kept up with the added productivity of American workers since then, it would be more than $21 an hour. In addition, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would lift more than 1 million Americans out of poverty, according to a recent report by the Congressional Budget Office.
I have a question. Why did Reich choose 1968? Because it's very strange to pick that year instead, 1938, the first year it was created, where its value today would be $5.34. The reason why Reich chose that year was because it was one of the highest values of the minimum wage that year, even though there are many years where the current minimum wage surpassed the previous ones, and honestly, the minimum wage is just completely arbitrary price fixing. While for the $21 claim, the way you would get that number is simply combining the whole productivity of the economy, but if you instead measure it by the productivity of the restaurant industry from 1987 to 2017, it would be $8.25. Of course, making the minimum wage by productivity is simply ridiculous because different industries have different levels of productivity, and people in those industries have different levels of productivity. Would you honestly say that guy who got hired today would have the same productivity as the guy with 5 years of experience? That would be ridiculous. Of course, minimum wage workers themselves' largest increase in their personal income was from gaining experience, according to this study from the National Bureau of Economic Research. Well, for the CBO claim of declines in poverty, it depends on what estimate, because the CBO median estimate shows a 1.3 million workers losing their jobs, and at worst, 4 million people losing their jobs and going to poverty. Of course, the CBO estimate for poverty has some problematic methodology because it is based on the official poverty rate, which does not consider government benefits as income, and increasing the minimum wage could cause people to lose their welfare benefits, which would cause people to be worse off. Also, I am skeptical that minimum wage is even an effective tool for fighting poverty because this study looked at state and federal minimum wage increases from 2003 and 2007 and found no effect on poverty. The reason why minimum wage is not effective for fighting poverty, according to this paper from the Journal of Poverty, is because many poor people don't work the minimum wage, and job losses and many other factors.
Number 2, they say raising the minimum wage forces companies to lay off workers and slows economic growth. Another lie. Raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would actually boost economic growth by increasing the wages of an estimated 17 million Americans, who in turn will have more money to spend in their communities, which generates more economic growth.
This literature review from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that the minimum wage destroys minimum wage jobs, and this study here looked at the relationship between minimum wage increases and state GDP and found no significant effects. While for the 17 million figure, it is simply an estimate, and also the CBO report is not exactly rainbows and unicorns for minimum wage proponents. There are other problems with raising the minimum wage that would harm the economy, according to the Hill, such as increasing federal deficits from price increases, increasing shift in automation, and price hikes chipping away at income gains over time, and many other things this Hill article points out.
Number 3, they say raising the minimum wage is bad for employers. That is also mythological. It's not true. When the minimum wage is raised, more people are brought into the pool of potential workers, giving employers more choice of whom to hire. This reduces employee turnover, and it helps employers save money. because it's more expensive to hire and then train new workers than it is to retain good.
Okay, well, according to the actual data, this National Bureau of Economic Research study looked at 15.2 million small businesses from 1989 to 2013. They found that increasing the minimum wage leads to lower bank credit, higher loan defaults, lower unemployment, a lower entry, and a higher exit rate for small businesses. While for Reich's claim that minimum wage lowers turnover rates, my response is that this study from economist Vincent Gelasso argues that there is an optimal turnover rate, and raising the minimum wage would harm the optimal turnover rate, which in turn harms productivity. The reason why turnover rates are good to a certain extent is because it encourages workers to gain skills and find new firms to work for, better pay. But if you increase the minimum wage, these workers would have a lesser incentive to gain new skills, and more workers would have a lesser incentive to find new jobs, which would cause a decline in productivity. I highly recommend you to read this interesting article for more information. Another problem I would also point out is the fact that increasing the minimum wage would also price low-skilled workers out. In the book Cooperation and Coercion by economist Anthony Davies pointed out from 1984 to 2017, the unemployment for people with high school diplomas and people without high school diplomas have increased when the minimum wage increased. It's a very interesting chapter on minimum wage in the book Cooperation and Coercion. I highly recommend that section.
Employees. Number 4, most people who earn the minimum wage, they say, are teenagers or part-time workers, so there's no need to raise it. Well, that's just baloney. Only 10% of minimum wage workers are teenagers. In fact, more than half are prime age adults between the ages of 25 and 54, many of whom have children and are the breadwinners for their families.
Well, if you actually looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics of minimum wage characteristics of 2022, we find that at minimum wage from 16 to 24, they represent 60.2% of minimum wage workers, while on hours at minimum wage from 0 to 34 hours, they represent 74.8%, and from 35 to 39, it is 4.5% of minimum wage workers. While for kids argument, the Bureau of Labor Statistics does not count kids, but if we look at marital status of minimum wage workers, we find that at the minimum wage, 76.5% of minimum wage workers have never been married, and it is 12.7% for married and 10.8% for divorced or widowed.
Families. Number 5, they say that raising the minimum wage would generate inflation and erase any gains from the increase. No. Past increases in the minimum wage have not led to significant increases in inflation. There's no inflation. Look for it. You can't.
This study from the Institute of Labor Economics found an increase in price when a 10% increase in minimum wage causes a 4% increase in food and 0.4% increase in overall prices, which the author argues would harm the poor. Another study from the Journal of Political Economy argues that the minimum wage price increases is regressive to the poor, which is why it is not a good anti-poverty tool. This is the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and please donate to my Patreon so I can make more videos and have your video requests checkmated. And thanks for watching, and have a nice day.